As we consider the changes in men's lives who witnessed the resurrection of Jesus Christ, there's probably no greater example than to see the difference in the life of the Apostle Peter. Good morning, I'm Pastor Ernie Lewis of the Blue Point Church in Sisney, Illinois, with your thoughts for Wednesday. We see Peter as the impetuous and outspoken leader of the 12 disciples who followed Jesus. He had some great times when he spoke up in Matthew chapter 16. After the disciples had told Jesus that other people thought perhaps he was Elijah or even John the Baptist raised from the dead. But when pressed as to how these disciples saw Jesus, Peter spoke up and said, "You are certainly the Christ, the Son of the living God." His faith in Jesus as the Messiah was unparalleled. He was part of the inner circle, those who were present at the time that Jesus raised Jairus' daughter, or at the time of his transfiguration with Moses and Elijah. But when they headed to the Garden of Gethsemane after the Last Supper, Jesus approached him about his coming failure as a faithful disciple. First, we see him sleeping when Jesus had asked his followers to pray for him in the garden. Then, when Jesus was surrendering to the Roman soldiers, it was Peter that reacted by cutting off the ear of one of these soldiers to rescue Jesus, not realizing what God's plan was for him and following it. Then the next thing you know, they're leading him out of the garden, and the Bible says that Peter followed afar off, not wanting to get very close, perhaps for fear of these Roman soldiers. We also see Peter warming his hands with a strange group of people outside the hall where Jesus was being tried by the high priest. And he denied Jesus 3 times before the rooster began to crow, even with an oath. Perhaps this was about the time when he remembered Jesus' prediction on their way to the garden. For Jesus warned Peter in Luke chapter 22 and verse 31, "Simon, Simon, Satan has desired to have you that he may sift you as wheat. But I have prayed for you that your faith should not fail. And when you have returned to me, I want you to strengthen your brethren." You see, Peter declared his allegiance and his commitment to go to prison with him or even to death. And then Jesus told him, "Peter, the rooster shall not crow this day before you will deny me 3 times, even that you knew me." And these words came to haunt Peter when he did deny Christ. But we remember that Jesus said, "I have prayed for you, and when you return to me, I want you to strengthen the brethren." Now, at the point whenever Peter denied Jesus, he went out and wept bitterly. But the Bible does tell us that whenever Jesus was risen, he was one of the first ones to run to the tomb. He and John actually had a foot race to get to that empty tomb to find some evidence of Jesus being alive. Then, whenever we see the disciples gathered in Galilee and Jesus appears in their midst, certainly Peter is in that group. Over in Acts chapter 1, we find that Peter has gathered together the followers in an upper room where he is trying to find someone to replace Judas among these 12 disciples. He is taking a role of leadership. In Acts chapter 2, he stands up to defend those speaking in tongues, that he tells the crowd that these are not drunken. They're actually preaching the gospel of Jesus Christ, whom these crowds have crucified. Then in Acts chapter 3, we find that Peter and John are bringing healing to a man who has been lame since his birth. And when questioned for their actions, they boldly proclaim Jesus as their Lord. And the Sanhedrin remarked, "We realize these are untrained men," but the Bible says they realized that they had been with Jesus. Truly, whenever Jesus returned from the dead, Peter returned to follow him, became that faithful follower, and went on to preach to the family of Cornelius over in Acts chapter 10. Even though they were Gentiles, he preached to this Roman soldier and his family, and the Bible says the whole household was saved. You see, the resurrection gave Peter such a boldness to obey Jesus' calling upon his life as a disciple, and he never looked back. And I hope that we have that boldness today to follow Jesus faithfully.